Karen and I had a roughly 2 week vacation in Brazil as the guests of our friend Thomas Case, who was extremely generous. And when we were visiting him, he treated us to a helicopter ride over the city of Sao Paulo that to this day I can still remember. First, we went around the town. He showed us some of the local sights, and it's a beautiful city, a lot of older buildings. It's a gigantic city, much bigger than New York City. We did a little bit of investigating. The women went to a few museums, they went to a few parks, but the biggest part of the whole thing, we were going to actually have some of the best food I've ever had, and to some very, very nice restaurants. The restaurants, it's hard to describe how nice the restaurants were. This restaurant that we were in had a tree growing in the middle of it. It's supposed to be one of the nicest restaurants in Sao Paulo. And I guess this was all to get us in a great mood for our helicopter tour over the city. And it worked. So what we did, we finally left the restaurant. We finally went out down to the local airport where there's several helicopter tours available and police helicopters. And if you liked helicopters, this was a great place to be. This is a helicopter mecca. So while we are in the helicopter and getting ready to take a flight over Sao Paulo, I wanted to just identify the other people in the helicopter. Of course, the pilot, and David Fitzgerald and his wife, Howard Rush and his wife. And we're all in this. David, of course, is an airline pilot, and so he's perfectly familiar with all the protocol of putting seatbelts on and not mugging a pilot or whatever. Anyway, we're in Sao Paulo. And one of the things we were trying to determine early on is if the women were going to be comfortable in this helicopter. There is a lot of vibration in this helicopter. I was amazed. I have been in other helicopters that were a lot smoother. This one had a lot of shake, rattle, and roll going on, but of course it's that's the adventure, I guess. Anyway, in Brazil, everything is just a little bit different. The rules of flying above Sao Paulo are a little different than the USA. And David was discussing some of the changes, and because he's an airline pilot, he knows all of the little ins and outs of doing this kind of a flight. But this was an exciting part of our trip to Brazil. We went to several other. We went to Rio de Janeiro. I did some hang gliding with Thomas Case and with David too, and it was exciting. It's this video I just want to concentrate on because to me it was one of the high points. I want to spend all my energy on this helicopter ride, and it is a beautiful thing to fly over the city of Sao Paulo. And of course, the protocol for a helicopter takeoff, totally different than a fixed wing aircraft. And we had to follow the yellow brick road. We call it the yellow brick road. It's a yellow line out to the area where the helicopter can climb to altitude. And I want to take a nice picture of everybody's face smiling. Everybody was in a really good mood. Absolutely wonderful mood. And so many things about this were exciting. And actually, it turned out to be very nice weather today. Follow the yellow brick road. And as we become airborne, and of course, it's pretty spectacular, the view of Sao Paulo. And everywhere you look, it just was a unique view. I actually wish I had a camera out both sides of the plane. There were some interesting things right here in the beginning. It looked like that was some military planes there. Maybe that is. I don't know. But the city of Sao Paulo, if you looked out in any direction, no matter what direction you looked at, it was buildings and city as far as the eye could see. Now, the buildings didn't look a whole lot different than any big American city, but some of the, this looks like the train station here, maybe. You really can't tell. Or somebody, transportation center. We did fly over a lot of railroad tracks in the course of this, but needless to say, I couldn't identify it was something like Penn Station. Now, we are at an altitude now. We're lower than you would ever be able to fly over New York City here. We were flying between the buildings at some point in time. You can see we're actually not a lot higher than the buildings. Now, anybody like Dallas that knows about aviation, or anybody that's a pilot, knows this is not possible in the United States. Look at a big steeple on that church. It was very scenic. Every part of this was just as nice as it could be. I just couldn't believe how nice this. The helicopter ride really was one of the high points of our trip to Brazil. No, we actually stayed in Brazil. We stayed in Rio some of the time. We stayed in the villa outside of, I'm not sure what town it was. It was not in Sao Paulo. And in the main villa inside of Sao Paulo, which was really, really nice. And I'm so glad I shot some of this video. And this, look how low we're flying by these buildings. Now I can just picture, because when I used to fly my air coupe around New York City, up and down the Hudson, it was very strict, and you would never do anything like this. And because David in the front seat was an airline pilot, he was amazed that we were able to do some of these things. And to be honest, I was amazed. But the view was spectacular, and it definitely was one of the high points of our 2 weeks in Brazil. One thing really good, nobody got airsick on this, and I had taken Karen previously on an aerobatic glider ride, and she didn't do well, so her stomach was not happy. She did great. All the women did great. Actually, when we got done here, we went for a nice meal. Now, in the time we were in Sao Paulo, we also did some pretty interesting stuff. The women all went on I think what an American would call a shopping spree. They got to see some of the beautiful department stores. It's just really the center of Sao Paulo where we were. It was a real high-end place. I would liken it to Manhattan. You look down it from the air, it doesn't look a whole lot different than any other big city, but it is the thing that's really impressive is how big it is. It's just big. Yeah, right. Yep. And this looked like a sports complex, maybe a soccer. Of course, it's a soccer stadium. That's the national whatever. And I don't know if that circle thing is for some other activity, but it looked like a whole complex for sports activities right there. Oh, there's the flying circle. Okay. Now we're coming up on the complex, these two round runways where there's actually people from all over the world there that are already flying model planes practicing for the upcoming tournament that we went to Brazil for. And I was thinking, I hope we can stay over here long enough that I can get to see one of the planes fly from the air. And it looked like we just hit it just right. Somebody was getting ready to take a flight. But it was really, really a unique experience. And Thomas Case, who is our host every step of the way, and he ran this model plane tournament. And I just thank you, Thomas. This was a once-in-a-lifetime thrill. Of course, I think people that watch my channel know I've posted the hang gliding I did on Rio. And that was spectacular. And as time is available, I'm going to try to do some of the other highlights of this trip. We went to Cocovordo. We went to a samba show. If you've never been to a Brazilian samba show, I was blown away. And I'll try to find that footage too. Again, everywhere I go in the world, I document it. And years later, I'm always glad that I can share it with my friends and actually share it with you on YouTube. Especially if you've never been into Brazil. It is a fabulous, fabulous, and interesting place to visit. Believe me.
Zoo, look at that. You gonna got like a little island out there? This is the zoo right here.
Now this is the zoo, and I can't identify from this angle what animals are in what cages, but they had a lake, they had a pond with supposedly a real big collection of animals, and it looked pretty cool from the air. We actually got to see some of the animals from the air.
Gigantic monument.
So after roughly an hour, we headed back to the airport. We're coming down from altitude now. We have to find a helicopter landing pad, and this is a little bit different than landing a plane where you land on a runway. There's a designated spot where they land the helicopters. I'm not sure if this is true at all airports, but this one was. And then there's a yellow line. I think the line even lights up at night for when you're flying at night. And you have this designated area, and it's, to me, this was a very cool part of the whole experience of being up in a helicopter. Coming down from altitude, of course, your ears pop a little bit. But this was, of all the things we did in Brazil, and we did a lot, and we had the vacation of a lifetime, this was one of the highlights for me. the helicopter ride that night, we got a tour of the main part of the city. I don't know what actual part it is, but it was just like Manhattan. A lot of traffic, a lot of horn honking, and this is the restaurant we went to has a tree growing inside of it. A very nice restaurant. And look at the tree growing inside of the restaurant. That's not something you see every day. But a lot of things. There was just an endless supply of these very unusual things. And a giant model railroad. Now, right where the planes were flying, our model planes, there was a building, I think. This is a club. It's club owned. And they had an enormous, I love model trains. I have a train layout in my house. This was an enormous train layout. And after dinner, what could be better than a samba show? Now, I have been to a lot of Broadway plays and ballets, and Karen used to be an opera season ticket holder when I first met her. And I have been to a lot of shows, but I have some video of this show too. I just don't know if I have to find it. If I do, I'll post it. This was spectacular. And I had never seen anything this elaborate. The costumes, look at the size of the costume, the headdress, and all of the stuff. And of course, what happens in a samba show, you eat dinner right there, right? You can see we're standing there. Look at these costumes. And what happens then, the show is over, and they'll look at that costume. Check that out. And the girls come out, and they come to the men, and they make you dance. And if you can't run away from them either. They forced me to dance against my will. Once again, a most sincere thanks to Thomas Case, who was our host, allowed us to stay in his villas, and took us everywhere. And we actually went out into the country and bought bananas. And if you enjoyed this video, I may post some more of our trip. And thanks so much for watching.